ask you to give Michael an incredible warm welcome. Michael Pesin.
Good morning. First of all, thank you, Andres, for a super nice introduction. I will try to entertain you guys as much as I can. So, as Andres said, I am the Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Department of Energy, and my office is called Office of Electricity. So, what we are doing is, what we're responsible for is what I call electricity delivery system, or what industry calls T&D, and I'll talk about why I use different name. Let me first start with giving everybody an overview of what are the challenges we're facing today, what is happening from my perspective and from the department perspective. If I can figure out how to get slides. Perfect. So those are the main drivers of change. So we commissioned study by National Academy of Engineering and Science to help us understand what are all the things that is happening that we need to pay attention to? What is the reasons for the change, for evolution or transition of electric grid? So one of the big drivers, of course, is very significant efforts to decarbonize the grid and whole US economy. As you know, this administration is super bullish on this. They have very aggressive goals. The goal is to have completely carbon-free electric grid by 2035. So this is goal. It doesn't mean we're going to get there, but we're trying to do our best. But at the same time, while we're doing this, there's a growing threats from physical and cyber attacks. And from physical threats, not just man-made attacks, but also natural disasters. With climate change, we have a lot of events that we didn't have before. The intensity and frequency of hurricanes are staggering, so we need to address this. But in order to achieve our decarbonization goal while we're dealing with all these threats, we experiencing a very high rise of non-dispatchable and inverter-based generation. So what is it? So you all know about solar and wind, and one of the challenges with wind and solar, we can't really control them. So for 110, 120 years, this electric grid was able to forecast all the loads, which we've been doing a pretty good job, and we were able to control all the generation. Now we have to forecast both generation and loads. So for those of you who remember high school math, when you have one equation with two variables, you don't have a solution. So you need to have a second equation. So, and this second equation is energy storage and some other things that I talk about. Then grid edge is changing completely. So we now experiencing bidirectional power flow. Electric grid is not designed for that. When it was envisioned at the end of 19th century, nobody could predict that we're going to have power flows in both directions. So we need to address this. Demand for electricity changing, electrification, electric vehicles, electrification, industry electrification, everything leads to high demand, even though the demand for electricity was declining in the past. Now we see the growth of demand for electricity. Data centers with artificial intelligence, they're creating all new demand with new demand, not just for amount of energy, but for power quality. And then big efforts to reduce social inequalities. So when this green revolution started, we had a lot of deployment of rooftop solar panels, energy storage, Tesla Powerwalls, but people who took advantage of this, the people who could afford it. So we have a large segment of population left behind who carry the burden of the energy costs, but not getting enough benefits. So this is the big push from the government to make sure that we have fair distribution of benefits from this clean energy economy. And then impact of energy transition for unemployment. So we're going to have people who are displaced from their workplaces, coal miners, all kinds of people. We want to make sure that they have well-paid jobs, they have employment, so training, not just higher education, but vocational training. People can have jobs in the future and they can have their children have good jobs. And last but not least thing, which unfortunately I've been dealing a lot with lately, is the supply chain challenges. So supply chain being global. With pandemic, the challenges came in the forefront. So one of the huge issues in this country right now is supply chain for distribution transformers. So this is something I never thought about. So I worked for utilities for almost 3 decades before I joined government. And at one point of my life, when I was distribution engineer, I would just go to the yard, point to the transformer, it gets installed. And if we don't have it, we order it 6 weeks later, it's in the yard. Now it takes up to 4 years. The price for transformers is quadrupled. So our boss, Jennifer Granholm, Secretary of Energy, formed special task force, which I'm leading. We work with industry, manufacturers, utilities to identify ways to solve this problem. I don't have time to talk about this a lot, but I'll be happy to answer the questions. Oh, and by the way, I don't enjoy listening to myself. If you have a question, raise your hand. Feel free to interrupt me. I'll try to answer it. So what are we dealing with today? So electric grid. So I mentioned new term, electricity delivery system. So T&D was transmission distribution in the past. When in my days in the utilities, we have transmission people, distribution people, and they almost never talk to each other. There was no reason for that. Now transmission and distribution is merging. Line is blurring. It's becoming one big system. And not just transmission and distribution, but also customers. So it's transmission, distribution, customers, all affecting delivery of power, consumption of power, and generation of power, because now you have rooftop solar. So we're working on how to address this changing, the evolving paradigm, evolving industry structure. So what is this transition look like? So what we have today, we have or we had, I should say, it's now in the past, we had just very simple expectations. We wanted to have affordable power, we want to have reliable power, and we want to have secure power. That's about it. If lights are on, everybody was happy. Now we have completely new expectations that are emerging, or I should say now emerged already. So we want to be able to integrate diverse set of generation resources, solar, wind, all kinds of new generation that's coming online. We want to maximize benefits of end-use efficiency and storage. It's necessary to, as I said, to have a second equation that can balance supply-demand. We need to be able to take advantage of something else in addition to generation and energy and demand response, to put it in simple terms, so virtual power plants, which I'll talk about. Those are the tools to make it happen. So there is big push for electrification of transportation sector. Electric vehicles being very popular, and they're here to stay. To reduce dependence on imported oil, it generates new demand. And then we want to meet environmental constraints. Climate change is something that is real, it's happening, so we need to make sure we're addressing this. So this change that we see happening in the industry is going across the entire spectrum of utilities, policymakers, industry, regulators. So we need to change systems and components that comprise our electric grid. We're working on new devices. We're working on new transformers, new circuit breakers, new generators. System operations need to change. Now we need to have real-time situational awareness as we never had before. So what I call, we need to have much better observability. We need to be able to see things in order to be able to control. So observability and controllability, those are the two terms that we talk about, how to make sure that it exists, that we have a way nimbly operate electric grid. The way we do planning and analysis are now changing completely. So we can no longer, as I mentioned, work in transmission and distribution domains. It has to be fully integrated planning process. So we're talking about transmission, distribution, customer. So when utilities conducting their planning studies, they need to incorporate all these areas into one study, because now they interdependent, they're no longer separate. And then institutional decision making. We need to make decisions. We need to create policies. We need to create markets that can support innovation, that can support all these new technologies to be adopted by the industry. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, so what is happening? So I have this most useful tool I have is a crystal ball that sits on my desk, and this is the one that always gives me all the answers. So here's what my crystal ball tells me. So today we have this very, very tight coupling between all the components of electric grid. We have very capital intensive enterprise that existed for 100 plus years. There's two trajectories that electric grid is evolving. And people can argue which trajectory is the right one. I'll tell you what my crystal ball tells me. But one trajectory is moving to very high renewable energy penetration that will require high voltage AC and DC grids and require a lot of storage to address intermittency. That will have not such a tight coupling. It will have loose coupling because now we will have to be able to manage everything. So the other trajectory is when we have extremely complex industry structure with very high distributed energy resource penetration, with virtual power plants, with consumers participating in the electric economy. So this is another trajectory. So, but my crystal ball tells me that we're gonna have both. It's not one or another, so we need to manage it in a way that can support both trajectories at the same time. So we need to have dynamic, coordinated electric grid across not just generation, but across transmission, distribution, and customers. So what we need to have is what I call next generation electricity network. So it is similar to a revolution that happened in IT world, in data communication world. So today, electric grid more like a highway system. You get on ramps, you get off ramps. The future grid is more similar to your network, to your internet. When you have your data packets in the internet delivered in what they call lowest cost path, that route was determined. In the electricity world, you have your energy packets, so to speak, delivered in the most optimal pathways, in the lowest losses, least congested lines, not just on distribution, but on transmission level. So it requires control of flexible generations and loads. It requires a lot of energy storage. We need substitute for the loss of inertia. So people call it synthetic inertia. I'm not a big fan of this term because it's not really inertia. We need to have resources that are very quickly responding to changes. So grid forming inverters, something that can react to anomalies on the grid much quicker. So some studies done by NRL show that it's the speed of this response is more important than the amount of the response. So we're working on that. And then we need to be able to address multi-directional power flow. And this concept that being implemented right now called virtual power plants is ability to aggregate multiple distributed energy resources and provide services. This is something that is happening now, and I just talked to Andres today. This white paper that he shared is a very interesting one. It's perfectly aligned with what we talk about. So we need to make sure that we take advantage of all these distributed energy resources, both loads and generation and storage, so I guess all three, on the consumer side, so they can support the grid operations. So when we talk about this new type of loads, like electric vehicles, the question I usually ask is, well, quoting Kennedy, is don't ask what the country do for you, ask what you can do for the country. So when you have electric vehicle, don't ask just what grid can do for you, ask what your electric vehicle can do for the grid. So we're working on things that we call V2X, or what used to be called V2Grid, so vehicle to everything. So ability for electric vehicles to provide services, ancillary services. And regulatory environment is very conducive to this. So if you're familiar with FERC Order 2222, that allows you aggregate multiple distributed energy resources and provide services as an aggregator, this is what enables all this transition. Now, grid configuration, again, historically, it was static. You had few circuit breakers, you can switch lines, but we need to have a dynamic grid configuration at both distribution and transmission. New technology exists, power flow controllers, dynamic topology optimization. All these things are happening, and they are in the future. They're not quite widely adopted yet, but if you want to have electrical network, you need to have all these technologies implemented. And then evolving business and market structure. So energy aggregators, providing ancillary services, consumers participating in the market. All this happening at the same time, and this is what we are working on at the department. So let me talk a little bit about what needs to happen. Oh, perfect, I have time. Usually I'm out of time. So what needs to happen on these two trajectories at the same time? So There's a number of challenges with deploying a large amount of distributed energy renewable resources. One, as I mentioned, they are intermittent. They're not fully dispatchable. Two is they don't have rotating machinery, so they don't have inertia that contributes to stability of the grid. But the other challenge is most of these new renewable resources are not co-located with load centers, which means you need to bring this electricity from where it's produced to where it's consumed. The obvious answer is build more transmission, right? So build more transmission, everybody's talking about this, but in this country, it takes up to 10 years to build a transmission line. So we can't wait that long. So what my office is working on, I have teams working on new technologies that can increase transmission capacity in existing right-of-ways. So this is something that can be done quickly, and we don't even, for many of those projects, you don't even need to have environmental approval process, we call categorical exemption. So we can build this, upgrade these lines in real time. Some of these technologies allow you to upgrade capacity without de-energizing lines. So the simplest one is what's called dynamic line rating. And basically, it's ability to monitor conditions of the line in real time, and then you can calculate more accurately what the capacity or ampacity of the line is, and it can increase significantly capacity. So that's one of the technologies. Another one, already mentioned, power flow controllers. So you can route your electricity into the path of least resistance, because electricity, it doesn't flow the way you just can tell it to flow, right? So it does not follow laws that legislated by Congress. It follows laws of physics. So we need to change physical parameters of the line so it can flow in the optimal ways. And then topology control algorithms. We can change topology of electric grid to optimize this flow. One of the big efforts that we have right now is working on new technology called advanced conductors. So for the last 130 years, the most common conductor was called ACSR, which is aluminum conductor wound around the steel core. Great conductor, works perfect, but the problem is when it gets hot, when you put a lot of electricity, it sags, it limits the capacity, it starts touching lines, trees, causing wildfires. The new technology is instead of steel core using composite material. So these conductors don't sag that much, which means if you reconductor the line, same structure, same right of way, no environmental impact, you can double or in some estimates almost triple the capacity of the same line, which gives you the capacity needed to bring your renewables to the line. And then most of the grid today is AC. So war of the currents, again, at the end of 19th century was between AC and DC, and AC won. Tesla technology won. The main reason for that was there was no way at the time to increase the voltage for direct current to send it to long distances. HVDC has a lot of advantages, but this technology is very expensive. So what we're working on is reducing the cost, improving performance. It doesn't mean we need to change whole grid to HVDC. It would be fantastic, but we're not doing this. We identify strategic locations on the grid where we can convert it to HVDC, or when we build new lines, we can design them HVDC. And then for some of the generation resources, you have to have HVDC like offshore wind, because it's located a long distance offshore and uses cables, so you cannot send electricity by AC the distance, so it must be HVDC. So this is a one big effort that we're working on, and Congress recognized that. They wrote in one of my budget languages to create HVDC moonshot, which we're still working on because of the budget limitations, unfortunately. Other trajectory on the distributed energy resources. So what we really need to happen, and this is what I believe this white paper is talking about that Andres described, is we need to enable seamless integration to enable flexibility that is absolutely critical for reliability and resilience. So in the past, we had roughly hundreds of thousands of control points from generation and transmission. And then we had some control and some monitoring for distribution system. We had SCADA for utility supervisory control and data acquisition systems. But now we're moving to tens of millions of control points. So this is completely different paradigm, right? So this is something that we never had to deal before. We're talking about Internet of Electricity. So we need to move from next generation energy management systems that have better observability, integrated with distribution management systems, and then with building management systems at each building. So we need to find new ways to control this and optimize the control. So we're working on such things as transactive energy that allows you to calculate pricing at every given point on the grid, on the distribution system at a given moment of time, and send this signal to the to consumers so they can respond automatically using the control systems in their homes. And again, they don't need to be actively engaged in this. I usually say the best control system is system that nobody knows about. So it acts behind the scenes, right, completely seamlessly. But in order to be able to do this, we need to have grid architecture that is different from today's. They need to accommodate more distributed systems. We need to have so we need to recognize that lines between transmission and distribution are blurred. So that's why I'm using term electricity delivery system. I'm not saying T&D anymore. And we need to link your energy management system that utilities traditionally had with distribution management system and your building management systems or your virtual power plants that can be operated by third parties, not even utilities. So all these things that need to happen on that side. And I think last thing I want to say is, again, I can talk about technology for hours, for days, but technology by itself cannot succeed if you don't have a market that can adopt this technology. Market cannot exist if you don't have right policies that make this market possible, that make this market thrive. So our ability to transform the electric grid will require fully coordinated strategy across all stakeholders: consumers, utilities, industry, manufacturers, policymakers, regulators, state, federal, FERC, Department of Energy. So that's what we do in this. And we work on this, and this at the top, this is what's called TRL, technology readiness level. So we're working from basic science all the way to commercialization strategy that takes into account what policies need to be enacted, what regulatory changes need to be made in order to be able to change all this grid. And we don't want to talk about grid evolution, we want to talk about grid transition. The difference is evolution is happening by itself. Transition is something controlled that we can control. So we want to control this evolution so it becomes transition that brings us to the point where we want to be. And we want to consider climate impact, we want to consider reliability, we want to consider resilience, and we want to make sure it's affordable. So these four main pillars that we found all our programs on, it's reliability, resilience, security, and affordability. So those are the four main pillars that we need to be cognizant when we're designing the grid of the future. And this is what we're working on. And I think I have almost 10 minutes, so I am happy to answer any questions as long as they're not political.
So I have a question. So the government wants to do this. This is the direction that you think they're going to go in. What experts from the utilities throughout the United States are you using to formulate?
So if I think I heard the question. So government wants to do all this. What experts from the industry are involved in this?
Yes.
Yes. So one of the beauties about all our programs is they involve industry from day one. So this is how our typical program runs. So let's say I want to create new program. So I'll give you an example. I just created a new program 2 years ago. It's called Applied Grid Transformation. The idea for this program is to address the challenge of industry adoption. So nobody wants to be serial number one for any new technology. Utilities chronically risk adverse. Nobody wants to be the first to adopt new technology. Everybody wants to be a fast follower or sometimes even slow follower. So what this program designed to do is to take new technology that was developed by national labs or industry, put it in the controlled pilot test environment at national lab or at the utility, and validate performance of this technology, techno-socio-economic performance. So does it meet technical expectations? Does it mean functional requirements? Does it mean performance requirements? Does it provide economic benefit? Does it provide social benefits? And then we have national labs. We have, by the way, 17 national labs, which are amazing, right? It's called Hidden Jewel. The technology they have it just before I joined government, I couldn't even imagine the technologies, capabilities they have. So they do this, they validate it, and all this information is public. But before we start this program, we always have a stakeholder meeting, program review, and we invite, it's open invitation typically. We have mailing list, we know, well, I know most of the industry leaders, right? So we send invitation to everybody, and whoever can come, they come and provide feedback, provide input, and we take it very, very seriously. Then every year for every program, we have program review. And we invite all the industry experts, anybody welcome to attend, and we share what we've done, and we listen to the feedback. And it happens every single year for every single program. So industry engagement, so our power of convening is unparalleled. We can get, typically when we send invitation email, I would say over 50%, probably over 70% of people accept the invitation, they join us and they attend because they know that they get information about the latest and greatest things happening in the country. So as far as industry being engaged, we have it covered.
At the rate of change that we're actually seeing on the distribution and transmission grids, how quickly can this technology approach actually be deployed to actually begin to catch up or address where we're headed? Because you said not evolution, you want to have a transition and move to it. So these technologies about the conductor, if it's graphene or whatever you're using in the conductor material, how quickly can you get that in the system and catch up with the demand that's actually already rushing your way? Like,
Thank you for that question. That's exactly why I created this new program, AGT, Applied Grid Transformation. So depending on the technologies, some technology is technology driving policy, and sometimes policy driving technology. It goes both ways. When technology exists, so I'll use example of advanced conductors. So advanced conductors been around for over a decade. In Europe, they've been deployed, not broadly, but been deployed, there are a number of deployments. In US, very few utilities done it. There are a number of reasons for that. For some utilities just don't want to take the risk, be the first one, because let's be honest, these traditional ACSR conductors, steel core conductors, been around for 100 years. We know what's happening to them over 100 years. These composite core conductors, they've been around for a decade. Who knows what's going to happen in 50 years? And they expect it to last at least 50 years. So what we do to help industry to adopt them, we have a project right now that we acquired a whole bunch of different conductors from different manufacturers, and we put it in the national labs, and we partner with EPRI and NITRAC, so different organizations, and we put them in what they call accelerated aging testing. So we put in an environment where something they would experience over 10 years, but we can do it within several months. So we bend them, we put high current, high voltage, high temperature, ice. We heat them with different machinery. And then we put them in the synchrotrons because national labs have this ability to do hard X-ray and analyze the change on atomic level. So we can tell industry what will happen with these conductors in 50 years, and it will make them more receptive to accept it. And this is what we hear from the industry. On the other side of the spectrum to help adoption is policy. So in some regulatory environments, utilities were disincentivized to reconductor the lines because reconductoring was considered O&M expense and building new lines considered CapEx. And as you know, utilities CapEx, they get rate of return. So it's better for them to invest in something that can be considered CapEx, so they make money. Regulations changing, so the reconductoring is considered or will be considered in some cases capital expenditure. So financially, utilities are incentivized to invest in reconductoring. So that's an advanced conductor example. On the distributed side, it's a little bit more challenging to answer because sometimes technology is way too far ahead and people deploying the technology and they think they're here to stay, but it's not working out, right? So, but if you never try, the answer is no. So we will support all the new technology, we will pilot it, but the best way to assure adoption of new nascent technology is to validate it in the controlled environment, and that's what we're trying to do. Again, one of the challenges with distributed energy resources is they need to communicate, right? They need to rely on communication. So this revolution started, I would say, in mid-80s, where ICT, information communication technology, got merged with your power industry. And ICT has their own challenges. So cybersecurity is one of the big challenges. So right now we have encrypted messages going back and forth to ensure security, but we have quantum computing development. So our labs tell me that it's a matter of months when quantum computers will be able to break 256 encryption. So your encryption is going to be completely obsolete. It's no longer secure. So we're working on quantum encryption, well, quantum key distribution to start with, but quantum encryption, something that's unbreakable. So security is a huge concern. Then amount, as you saw in my picture, hundreds of millions of devices. How do you keep track of all these transactions? So blockchain technologies they're exploring. Again, not the blockchain used for Bitcoin, not the proof of work blockchain, but different flavors of blockchain like proof of control and others that don't require any energy to manage this blockchain. We're working on this to make sure that we can enable new solutions. So some things like peer-to-peer energy exchange. So if you have multiple consumers who have solar panels and they can exchange energy among themselves, they can use blockchain ledger to document those transactions and settle those transactions. And by the way, in India, they have this project already in place in one of the villages that is working on this technology. So many opportunities, many challenges. I think we live in the most exciting time in this sector. When I started 40 years ago, I couldn't imagine it's going to be that exciting. More questions?
I'm just curious, are you doing anything to support exposure of the end user to the price of electricity? It's sort of a fundamental thing. If we want a smart grid, there's nothing to be smart about if 10 cents is 10 cents is 10 cents.
Yeah, another good question. So many utilities implemented what TOUs, time of use pricing, but it is no longer sufficient. So time of use pricing is a very good intermediate step. It helps to manage your peak demand, but there are other technologies that are more helpful to the grid. So I mentioned one called transactive energy, for example. We've been working on this for many years, PNNL, Pacific Northwest National Lab, been deploying a number of pilots. So the idea is you calculate the price in every node in every moment of time on distribution system, and you communicate this price signal to the consumer. Now, you don't expect consumer to sit on the computer and become day traders of electricity price. Nobody expects this to happen. You have a system, home energy controller, or whatever flavor it is, it can be third-party aggregator that does it, and that optimizes energy consumption. So for example, if you charge an electric vehicle and your transactive energy price signal says it's cost 2 cents per kilowatt hour right now, again, it doesn't have to be real price, by the way, it's just virtual price. Your electric vehicle start charging. And then your transactive energy say, well, this is 6 p.m. in the afternoon in San Diego, sun comes down, everybody comes home, so your duck curve is starting to raise its head, huge peak demand, electricity is super expensive. I can send you signal $10 per kilowatt hour, some ridiculous number. Electric vehicle will say, oh, I don't want to pay that much. Even though in reality, it doesn't have to even pay anything, but it's just a signal. And then it curtails its charging until the time it is cheaper.
Okay.
I think I'm out of time. I can speak for a couple hours, but
Okay, can y'all hear me all right? All right.
Yep.
Thank you, Michael Pesin. That was great.